Thank you, Susan. It's our pleasure, my teammate Michael Mahoney and I, to be here to talk to you about NEHRP, which we spend 98% of our time working on, as well as the functional recovery project that we're on the hook for. Let's see. Here we go. NEHRP has been around since 1977. It's a venerable program. It started under Jimmy Carter. It has been reauthorized over the years. It was reauthorized on December 11th this past year after a number of years of intervening in between the last reauthorization. But the new legislation is very good. It's got a lot of new things in it. The new things include not only the reauthorization of the programs, but it expands the activities of the four agencies: USGS, FEMA, NIST, and NSF. We're now looking specifically at community resilience in a focused manner. We've got specific things we have to do. We're required to publish maps. USGS has been doing that for years, but looking more intently at human-induced, has responsibilities for continuing development of the ANSS system and earthquake early warning technologies. And that's jointly, the EEW is jointly funded with California and other private entities. It revises or expands the duties of the Interagency Coordinating Committee. That means nothing to anybody in the real world, but for us, it's the four principles of the NEHRP agencies, as well as the science advisor to the president and the manager of the budget, Mick Mulvaney. So they've got specific duties in there. We need them to be in the game when we talk about critical things like earthquakes. It requires the Government Accountability Office, which is a part of Congress, to do a comprehensive assessment of NEHRP. What have we done over the past 40 years? What have we done right? What hasn't been done? What needs to be done? The whole story. That's a big thing. The federal government has not done that in the past. It's been done by others. This is a big thing. This thing starts in 2 weeks. And the reason we're here, it requires NIST and FEMA to jointly convene a committee of experts. Some of you in the room have been tasked with being part of that, to assess and recommend options for improving seismic safety standards for functional recovery. There's that word again. The language specifically is by the 1st of December, we've got to have this committee in place. We're actually ahead of the game on that. It's got a laundry list of most everyone in the United States, professional associations, professional construction and home building industry reps, private sector, NGOs, a variety of people. To assess, recommend options for improving the built environment and critical infrastructure. So we're now looking beyond the individual building. And as Chris mentioned, the resilience piece says it's more than just a building. If I have a building that that survives the earthquake and is able to function, but I have no power, no water, no ability to get anybody there to go to work, I have a real problem. And so we're expanding the role of the NEHRP definition into this new space. We've got to look at post-earthquake reoccupancy and functional recovery time. It's not immediate necessarily. but it's a defined recovery time. And oh, by the way, we've got to have this done by the 30th of next June, and we're thrilled about that. So the terminology is going to look at options. It's not going to solve the problem. It's got to look at what's possible. One or more options, many options perhaps, that can reach these goals. It's both the technical, the engineering part, the building part, as well as the social parts. How do you implement it? How do you pay for it? You know, what are all of the questions that exist that you can focus in terms of a set of options? The critical infrastructure is defined by the Patriot Act. You all remember that. It includes national level and virtual systems that are not applicable here. The rest of the reauthorization uses the terms Lifelines infrastructure, so they're a little flaky in their terminology. But Lifelines, as it says, public works and utilities, transportation, oil and gas. The issue here is you have multiple sectors involved. Pipelines, water systems are designed differently than fuel and gas systems. They're designed differently than electrical distribution systems. So it's a real collection of people that normally don't talk to one another. Other terminology, the built environment, performance goals, the reoccupancy. This gets back into the resilience question. We had an assignment 2 years ago, courtesy of the Senate. I believe that Senator Feinstein was the author of a requirement that we do a study on immediate occupancy. We've got a document that was put together. That was an interesting exercise. It looked at a number of these things, but it was looking at it from the lens of an immediate occupancy question. The functional recovery, I think, is a lot more realistic. We've got some resource material. We've got links for reports that are research needs. Issues, immediate occupancy, that's the report I just mentioned. Community resilience program that Chris Poland mentioned, there's a whole list of publications there. NIST has got a couple of Lifeline systems, R&D reports. This pales in comparison with what FEMA has done. So I'm going to hand it over to my teammate.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
So good morning, everybody. My name is Mike Mahoney. I'm with the FEMA Earthquake Program, as Steve said. What I want to do is, Steve mentioned the resource materials that NIST can bring to the table as part of this exercise. FEMA has some as well that I just want to make sure they're on the agenda for our committee of experts. The first and foremost, I think, is the next generation of performance-based seismic design procedures, better known as FEMA P58, an offshoot of the ATC 58 project that went on for 15 years and a whole lot of money, that developed this material, and I think it was very successful in doing so. It was a state-of-the-art process to determine, or provided a state-of-the-art process to determine how to design a building to a specific performance level, and that included the ability to determine the downtime, the costs, and casualties. And that material would in turn help frame the definition of functional recovery. In particular, FEMA P58-5 is an excellent resource that you can use to determine the performance of current code-compliant buildings or different designs. And using that tool, we can then increase the stiffness, okay, or whatever change we want to make to the building, and see how that in turn affects its performance. So we've got some powerful tools there that can be brought to the table. In terms of what has been done, we did a report on the performance of buildings and non-structural components after the South Napa earthquake. that documents the performance of not just buildings that fail, but we actually, using an ATC process, identified a seismometer, drew a 1,000-foot circle around that seismometer, and looked at every building inside that circle. So it's good performance, bad performance. We're able to document both in that report. So a good source there. And then resilient-based design and NEHRP provisions. This is the paper that David Bonowitz is working on that was referenced earlier. It would be part of the NEHRP recommended provisions, the 2020 edition. It's still being balloted, so it is not available yet, but we hope it will pass ballot next month and then be available. So there you go. But an excellent starting point as well. I want to mention that. Some other materials. There's a Mitigation Saves 2.0 report that was done for us by the National Institute of Building Sciences. Basically makes the case for the cost effectiveness of higher performance levels. FEMA has a community Lifelines implementation toolkit that has a lot of resources for the Lifelines side of the equation. And in regard to that, we also used to fund an organization called the American Lifelines Alliance. It was an organization formed to develop standards for specific lifelines that could be used to determine their ability to function. Unfortunately, we stopped funding that when we lost some resources, and the organization is kind of in hiatus at the moment, I guess, but it does have a website, and those reports that they had done are available on that website. And then finally, FEMA, as part of its normal process, has a series of frameworks, including the National Recovery Framework, which would come into play here as well, and how we would support faster, more effective recovery. So those are the resources. Now let's get back to the assignment that FEMA and NIST were given by Congress. We have already met, we have already developed a plan to meet the requirement, and we have begun to implement the plan. We identified the committee of experts, as the term was used in the Act. We broke that into two different groups. One, the group that will probably be doing the bulk of the heavy lifting is the Project Technical Panel, and FEMA has already funded or used existing funds through the Applied Technology Council, so we kind of cheated a little bit. We were able to, within the scope of an existing task, give ATC the assignment to start that process, and you'll see more about how we did that in a moment. The other half of that committee of experts will be a project review panel that NIST will be funding to provide review and input throughout the entire process. As I say will be, they're still in the process of getting that contract finalized. The project technical panel will collect information, develop a draft, expanded outline, draft report, however you want to frame it, as the first draft for public review in a review process I'll get to in a moment. This will also be funding a series of stakeholder workshops that will take place early next year. There will be 5 of them. You see the cities there that we intend to hold them at. They will be open to the public for them to provide input into this process. And based on those inputs, as well as the project review panel, the technical panel will complete the report of options by early April, submit it to FEMA and NIST for finalization. And then we go through our little game, which is we submit that report to the Office of Management and Budget for their blessing. Assuming that happens, we then submit to Congress by June 2020, and everybody's happy. That's the plan anyway. We'll see. Once that is done, and once that has been submitted to Congress, it then becomes public material. FEMA and NIST will jointly publish a joint report on the report of options for public distribution. So until we submit it to Congress, it's not actually a public document. That's one of the rules we have to play by. Yes, okay. For the project technical panel, we identified 20 members from the interest areas that were specified in the Act. We basically took those interest areas, identified organizations within those areas, and then identified people within those organizations, or the organizations did it for us either way. And that makes up the panel. The panel will meet multiple times in person and remotely throughout the process. We are actually holding 2 meetings this fiscal year, 3 next fiscal year is our plan. We met virtually back in June, the end of June, so we got the process started. And we are holding our first in-person meeting tomorrow, since a great many of those experts are here in the room. We figured to take advantage of that and get the process going even further. So. And then the review panel, once they're online, they'll be jointly meeting with the technical panel as This is a list of the interest areas that were identified in the Act, the organizations that we identified within those areas, and then the names of the representatives for those organizations. I apologize for the small font. That's what happens when you have 20 people. But that information is available, and happy to, if you have any questions, happy to discuss that. But we think we have a really good representation on both the building side and the Lifeline side, government side, private side, different organizations that participate in the process, including the building code process, as Mike Pfeiffer described. So we're really happy with this group. I think you can expect great things from them. So. And the panel, as I said, will provide a report that will be the starting point for those public workshops. They will receive input from different ways, including those stakeholder workshops, including directly, people speaking directly to the technical panel during their meetings, by invitation or by the project review panel itself. So we anticipate different ways of getting that input, and hopefully that will be help the technical panel provide a complete, thorough list of different options. As I said, the options report will be then submitted to FEMA and then through to Congress by the end of June. To wrap up, my last slide, I want to kind of circle back to the language that was in the Act and make sure we're all clear on what we're tasked to do. And that was develop a report of recommended options. Unfortunately, options is not a roadmap. Sorry, Susan. There we are. But it does task us on both the built environment side and the infrastructure side. So we need to bring both those groups in and provide this in terms of reoccupancy and functional recovery time. The technical panel has a lot of autonomy. We're really not restricting them to wherever direction they want to go. Really just their task is to come up with a series of recommended options. It could be one, it could be many. It could take different avenues to get there. We're really leaving it up to them. But this really does provide opportunities for us to work within those communities, and we look forward to doing that and getting involvement from the public in the part of that process. With that, thanks very much.